So, uh, so for the time being, probably just going to be making videos like this, just recording myself in my car, just ranting about shit. But I'm on my lunch break right now. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. So for the time that I have until I have to go back in, what I wanted to talk about is kind of rather quickly, although I shouldn't really like talk about this in a quick manner because I feel like it's very there's a lot that goes into it. But I was listening to an interview by Huey P. Newton from 1970, and I kind of just wanted to make this video real quick. And the interview, it was rather long, and there was a certain section that piqued my interest, and it was on the topic of national liberation and national liberation struggles. And people that know about Huey P. Newton and have read what he has written, he talks about intercommunal struggle and how national liberation struggles transform or should evolve into intercommunal struggles, because nations that are fighting against the exploitive factors by the Western imperialism are fighting against the same enemy, and so one struggle becomes all struggles. And Huey P. Newton spoke on how Americans within the imperial core, and this is how I interpreted what he said, but how Americans within the imperial core should recognize and support these national liberation struggles as well, and through that process recognize the raw material, that's his words that he used, the raw material that is used by the Western imperialists that they take from these nations, and that they take through robbing and stealing and just completely eviscerating these nations' cultures and societies.
We can hear the imperialists whip crack, and we view the developing countries of the world as the countryside of the world, and as one country, as one developing country becomes free, and it advances the freedom of all of us, because until we choke the imperialist raw material, which he gets from the developing country, which he rapes and robs from the developing country, there will be no chance of liberation at home here. In other words, that we see a definite connection between our enslavement, our exploitation, and the exploitation of the Vietnamese people and people of Cambodia, Thailand, Latin America, Asia.
Because, the recent events that are going on in Sudan at the moment, that conflict in Sudan is being perpetrated by the trade of gold. Not really trade, but the stealing of gold from the mines in Sudan, and the gold being sold to the United Arab Emirates, and how the United Arab Emirates are supporting the rapid action forces, the paramilitary, the mercenaries that are committing these mass atrocities, or have been committing these mass atrocities back in since the war in Darfur. This conflict is perpetrated by money, by greed, by the Western imperialist necessity to sow chaos and ferment chaos to acquire these resources. And the United Arab Emirates is a puppet state of the United States. So that should tell you all that you need to know. And even the genocide going on in Gaza, the recent ceasefire, quote unquote, Israel's not going to uphold this ceasefire, primarily because that's not what settler colonial nations do. Settler colonial nations they sit in a perpetual fear of the conquered, pretty much. For a historical example, it would be Sparta. Sparta was deathly afraid of a Helot rebellion, and so they did everything, and so they lived in a perpetual state of fear of this rebellion. So they did everything in their power to make sure that the Helots knew that the Spartans were in charge. So they would conduct mass atrocities against the Helots to keep them in line. Same thing we see with Israel. They conduct these massive atrocities against Palestinians to keep them in line. And it's the same. And I think primarily this shit isn't new. Like, the historical context for each, like, for a imperialist, settler, or colonial state is that they all build up on top of each other. They're all trying to, they all utilize certain aspects that each form of these like states utilized. Because for like Nazi Germany, Hitler was very he was very infatuated with how, or I guess infatuated is like not, influence is a better word. He was very influenced by the Americans and how the Americans manifest destiny. He equated the Nazi idea of Lebensraum, or living space, with the American like manifest destiny, and the displacement and removal of the Native American population. South Africa based their apartheid off of the Canadian Indian Act, which, similar to the Americans, basically starved the native population to remove them, to make way for settlers. And once we recognize these like patterns, I feel like we would be able to actually do more to restrict these states from utilizing these aspects, halting their ability to strip people of their resources, of their culture, of their society. Settler colonial nations aren't like, they can't sit idly by. They're driven by the necessity to conquer and take and exploit and just completely rob the resources of the native population. It is a perpetual cycle of settler colonial nations to commit mass atrocities for the purpose of generating resources, capital. And so we as Americans now should recognize these factors that go into these conflicts and the exploitive nature of these conflicts, even in the modern time. And not a lot of people in the American left are doing that. They're not recognizing these exploitive factors. People, the left, and I guess more generally people within America, live in like a bubble. They construct this box that they reside in, where they only want to focus on themselves and their own treats. And so it's a cycle of just degenerating our very own idea of culture and society, because we can't see any other outcome other than just complete annihilation for these people. There's a different outcome. We could help these people. We could stand with these nations that are being completely destroyed. We just don't, because we're just selfish fucks in the long run. And it's what the main problem is with the left in the United States. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like there's no support for these sort of for these conflicts, for these nations, because you saw the mass support that Palestine is getting. There's mass support, not as much as Palestine, but there's support for Sudan, there's support for Yemen. It's just it won't go far enough, is where I'm trying to get at, is that people within the United States will go out and have their little protest, but then they'll go to brunch afterwards. They won't actually keep up the fight in recognizing and supporting these national liberation struggles. And I think with that sort of attitude and that sort of mindset, we can't get anywhere, because the United States is the main central power. It is the main central cog in this capitalistic machine. It is the one thing that is driving these conflicts. The United Arab Emirates wouldn't be able to continue their financial support in Sudan if the United States said something to the United Arab Emirates. If they did anything, which they have the power to do, they can place tariffs on the selling of gold, on the transport of gold, but they just don't. So it's very deep factors that really need to be changed, because like Huey P. Newton said, like these nations in the global south, there are comrade nations. Once their national liberation struggles are transformed into intercommunal liberation struggles, our own liberation will come. It's just we need to get to that point of supporting these struggles by these nations. But that's pretty much all I wanted to speak about. I'll probably talk more about some stuff later on today, but yeah.